What's going on YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here, bringing you guys another video. Today I'm bringing you guys a video on Kishiryu Sentai Ryusoulger, episode 4. This episode is called Dragon and Tiger Fastest Battle, and the episode overall was really good. It introduced a couple of things, and it definitely shows that there's story progression happening, which is really good. So let's get started talking about all of that. This episode begins with us seeing that Toa and Bamba, the two brothers, are now traveling looking for their Dino Knights, and they're not really sure where they should go, but they also realize that they're being followed, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was Bamba. It might have been Toa, but I believe it was Bamba who recognizes that they're being followed, and he actually uses the Extend Soul, which allows him to quickly capture the person that's following them, and it turns out to be that it's Ko. Ko is actually following them because he wants them to be friends, he wants them to be together, and what happens is that, you know, they're not really interested at first, but then he says, well, I have a map that could probably take you to where your Dino Knights are if you're looking for them. And what happens is that piques their interest. And the thing is that first Toa and Ko end up fighting against each other over this, and we see that they decide that they're going to challenge each other to certain competitions in order to determine what will happen. Because if, say, Toa wins, then they just get the map. If Ko wins, then Toa and Bamba join the team. So again, there's this, you know, they're not trusting each other, they're not necessarily on the same side at this moment, but, you know, it's clear that they will be, and it's clear that it will happen fairly quickly. So what does end up happening is that they start off by having a simple competition where they end up slashing through each other, and it looks like they're going to try to hurt each other, but in all honesty, what actually happens is that rather than hurting each other, they're actually just trying to slice through leaves that fall from a tree, and whichever person makes like a more creative or create something that looks better by slicing through leaves will win. And what they have is that, like, Ko makes a bunny rabbit, while like Toa makes two men shaking hands and giving their card to each other or something like that. It's like really interesting, very detailed, but they end up arguing over that. So then they have like another competition, which is just rock paper scissors, and that doesn't work because they keep on tying with each other. And what happens is that in the meantime, we end up seeing that back at the base there was this point with the map where you know, Yui's father is confused where the map went, and what happened is that he doesn't know that Ko stole it. And so from there we end up seeing as well that they end up finding out that there's a Minosaur attack. And so what happens is that Melt and Asuna head into battle, and we see them fighting against the Kraken Minosaur. So what happens is they end up fighting against him, and eventually Ko is called by Asuna to go join in the battle. So what happens is at that point they think, you know what, we'll settle this by seeing whoever defeats the Minosaur first wins. And so they end up heading into battle. They each transform. We actually see at first that Toa and Bamba transform together, which is nice to actually see their full transformation, not just them just showing up out of nowhere like it was in episode 3. So that's good to see finally. So we guys can know like what their like names are in the senses of their titles, which is something that's very common in a number of morphing sequences in Japan, is that kind of stuff, or the transformation sequence. Because like we learned that, you know, Bamba's the glory knight, while Toa is the haste Knight, I believe it is, or the haste. Yeah, I believe that's right. So, which makes a lot of sense because he's supposed to be very fast, and glory isn't as clear, like it's not as defined, but what I see it as is that he's just much stronger and much tougher, and that's true in general because, again, Toa relies more so on the Speed Soul, which is fitting with who his character is and what his, you know, Dino Knight is supposed to be and everything like that. And Bamba is tougher, he's more bulky and, you know, strong, and he just seems like a tougher character, not to mention his Dino Knight is also meant to be pretty bulky and tough, not something you want to mess with. So there's kind of a equivalence and balance to it, and like having a solid soul makes a lot of sense for Bamba, because like solid means that it's like sturdy, it's tough, it's nothing you can just easily break, which is, again, it fits into that whole entire idea. I think that's one of the things that I really love about it, is that aspect of it, is that the characters really portray the aspects of their Dino Knights, which is really good. So we get to see them fight against the Kraken Minosaur, which doesn't go very well overall. It keeps saying here, which they're not sure as to why it's saying that. Again, as we learned from episode 3, there's always a meaning behind these different things. Like, it's not just that they say things because they're saying things. It's supposed to reference or refer to something that the person that made the Minosaur had a need for. So the question is obviously, what led to this? Why is it doing this? And what can they do to defeat it without destroying the human? So what happens is that this is happening. Eventually we see some drone soldiers, and so what happens is that actually Toa suggests that they go up against the drone soldiers to determine who wins, instead of just dealing with the Kraken Minosaur. And Kieran's there as well, and he's like, why are you getting involved in all, like, why are you all getting so close and getting involved in all this so much? And he's a little freaked out and overwhelmed by it, but they eventually do end up escaping. And what does end up happening is that at one point Toa and Ko end up heading off following the Minosaur, and the Minosaur leads them to a kind of fountain area, where it turns out that he was leading them there intentionally for the purposes of Tank Joe to appear, and Tank Joe actually ends up attacking them. So we see him come from behind, and the two of them don't do very well and actually fall into like the fountain area, but then Bamba is actually falling behind them, and he actually ends up getting into a battle with Tank Joe, and he does pretty well, but it doesn't last long. He doesn't lose, he just isn't able to really deal with Tank Joe. And so what happens is that eventually Tank Joe ends up taking the Kraken Minosaur with him away so that they can retreat for now. And so what happens is that from there they end up trying to figure out who is the human that that made the Minosaur and everything like that. So they end up finding that there's this man with his child, and the thing is that this child is in the hospital, and he keeps saying, and the man keeps telling his son that, I promise when you get out of here, we'll be able to play and just have fun and just enjoy ourselves. And the thing is that they're like, so I guess it must be the son, because that would make a lot of sense. And so what happens is that obviously Bamba normally would just go and attack the guy, but they try to reason with him, and they try to think of what they could do instead for the time being. They say that why don't we work together to find your Dino Knights. So what happens is that at that point they end up opening up the map, which finally Asuna and Melt find out that apparently Ko had stolen it, and they end up heading to two temples, one of which Bamba and Asuna head together. And the thing is that like Bamba isn't very talkative. Asuna tries to make small talk, but like Asuna isn't really having it, and he uses the compass, which leads him nowhere near where the temple is really supposed to be. On the other hand, we see that Mel, Ko, and Toa end up heading to a real temple, and the thing is that at first Toa uses the float soul, and the float soul doesn't work with the temple to actually like lift it or create an opening, because the temple is closed off. And then what happens is that at that point Ko summons Tiramigo and tries to open it with Tiramigo, and Tiramigo isn't strong enough to deal with it either. So they're like, okay, well, this isn't working at all, so what are we gonna do? But what happens is that we see at the same time that the Kraken Minosaur has now grown big, and he's attacking the city. And the thing is that the Kraken Minosaur's ability this time is that he can actually put people to sleep, into a really deep sleep exactly. It's not clear as to why it is that way though, because there's nothing having to do with the Kraken that I would think of that has anything to do with sleep, and there's nothing having to do with the actual reason behind why this Minosaur was created for sleep exactly. So I don't really fully grasp the logic behind it, but I'm not complaining overall. Anyway, what we do end up seeing is that Asuna and Bamba, contact them about the Minosaur, and so what happens is that the three of them head off to deal with it. Ko summons Tiramigo. He ends up turning it into the Kishiryu form, and what happens is that following this, Asuna and Melt end up summoning Trican and Encloso. So at that point, the three of them form, Kishiryu Three Knights, and they try to deal with the Minotaur, which doesn't work very well. But what we see is that eventually Bamba ends up heading back to the to where the man and his son was, and he actually determines that the real person that is being affected isn't the son, it's actually the father, because he remembers how it keeps saying here, and it has more to do with the fact that it's like asking for something, rather than like calling out for something. So what it's asking for is, to play, and the person that it's asking is the father, because he wants to play with his son. He wants to be able to be with him, and so it's clear to him at that point that it's his father that's really the one that is causing it. And so at that point, Bamba normally would take him out, but he doesn't. We learn why later on in the episode, which is interesting. And I'm sure that there's going to be more to that aspect of the story later on in the show as well, because we'll learn more about their backstories. But yeah, what does end up happening is they find that out and they learn about how he wants to play. And so what happens is that Toa mentions, why don't we do what we did with our game and do it with the Minotaur? So at that point, Ko ends up trying to challenge him to certain games, like they do the rock paper scissors game, and then they also try to do a game of tag. And so what happens is that Ko ends up leading the Minotaur to the temple where Toa's Dionyte is. And so when he gets there, he's like, you can't get me, and he tries to and so what happens, he's like, try to shoot me, and so he tries to lead him on, and what happens is the attack ends up blasting through the temple, creating an opening, and that leads to Tiger Lance, his Dionyte, coming out. And at that point what happens is that Toa ends up having Tiger Lance combine with Kishiryu, so that it forms Kishiryu Tiger Lance, which is the combination that features all four of the characters, including it features Asuna's, it features Tiramigo, Encloso, Tiger Lance, and Triken, all combined into one mecha. Tiger Lance's legs become the arm, attached towards the front of the arms. The sword become Triken's tail / the lance becomes a sword, and then Tiger Lance's head goes on the front of it. And we also have additional bits that go on the chest, and the head for Tiger Lance, actually, the Tiger Lance real soul goes into the head place. They end up fighting and winning, and then what happens is that once everything is good, they end up returning. We end up seeing that at from here we end up learning that Bamba lets them go because he thinks that family is really important. And what happens is that eventually Bamba gets Manito, things are good, and it turns out that Toa is now starting to like being with the other three, and so it looks like they're going to likely be a team. And we see at the end that the Ryusoulgers rejoice, and apparently the map is underneath a pot of curry that Yui made, and her father's not very happy about that. So otherwise, that's about it for me, guys. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you guys think. Did you guys like this episode? What did you like about it? What things are you looking forward to seeing? Next episode will introduce us to the Manito combination, where Manito will make up the majority of it. And then we should be seeing either in episode 6 or 7, I believe. Probably 7. The combination, which is the 5 Knights form, which features all 5 Ryusoulgers combined into one mecha, which should be very cool. So otherwise, that's been for me. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Samurai 71, and goodbye.